Hey, this is Dr. Neal Schwartz. Today I'd like to talk about the patient-practitioner relationship and how trust, or lack thereof, can affect the outcome of any medical treatment. I drew a chart here, and it begins with the concept of trusting your practitioner or not trusting your practitioner and how important this is in treating your medical problems. Remember, you're choosing your practitioner in most cases, so the bottom line of this whole chart when we get done is to make sure you choose a practitioner that you trust, whether you trust their credentials or you trust the recommendation you got from someone you know, or you trust their body of work, or you trust something they said. Whatever it is, you either trust them and you go with them, or you choose a different practitioner. Let me show you specifically how trust works into the patient-practitioner relationship. If you do not trust your practitioner, there is a high risk that whatever they recommend for you, you are going to be non-compliant with. You're not going to do it for whatever reason. Whether you make an argument or you negotiate it or you defy it, you may ask, why should I do that? Or why should I do what my doctor told me? Or you may say, maybe I'll do that later. There won't be any urgency to do it in a timely manner. Whatever it is, it's the lack of trust that leads to non-compliance. And you may be non-compliant because you don't believe the recommendation is appropriate for you. This is opposed to when you do trust your practitioner. When you trust your practitioner with your life and your livelihood, you will do their recommendations in a timely manner without hesitating or being fearful or second-guessing or negotiating. It's when you don't trust them that things don't happen immediately in a timely manner. You typically, they'll ask you to do something on day one, and you may wait a week before you do it because maybe you didn't believe that it was important for you. Whatever it was, it stems from the emotion of trust or distrust. Now, this isn't simple and straightforward. What if your doctor does make a mistake and tells you something that is bad for you? You have two options here. You can either just decide you no longer trust them and no longer be under their care. That way you don't risk failure that we're going to get to in a second. Or you can continue to trust them. If you trust your practitioner and your practitioner gives you a recommendation that doesn't make sense for you at all, then in a situation where you trust your practitioner, you go back to that same practitioner and you ask them to either review the recommendation, so you do second guess it, which is oftentimes you lose time, but sometimes worth it, and you ask them to explain to you a little better why it is that they asked you to do what they asked of you. If you trust them, then their explanation will land, you'll hear them, and then you'll go on to be compliant. If you don't trust them to begin with, whatever explanation they say isn't going to land, and you need to find a new practitioner. That practitioner you no longer trust. Let me show you what happens when you stick with a practitioner you distrust. First, you're non-compliant based on either hesitating or negotiating or just defying. Then you have a treatment failure, or at least you're at risk of a treatment failure. Sometimes you get lucky. Even when you're not compliant, you still get better. But oftentimes when you're not compliant, you risk a treatment failure. Now, at this point, you didn't trust your physician or your practitioner enough to help you. You should have found a new person immediately. But instead, a patient will often stay with the practitioner they don't trust. And in that case, there's a high risk of treatment failure. And now this treatment failure is due to the inaction and the noncompliance of not following the recommendation because of the lack of trust. This is the circle here. The tricky part about this right here is that a patient will oftentimes not realize that their treatment failure is due to their own inaction, hesitation, negotiation, or defiance of the recommendation. And the reason they don't see that is because they didn't believe that the recommendation was important for them. Now, if you trust your practitioner, you would be compliant immediately in a time-sensitive manner. And then you would be at high you would have a high chance of success. However, some may bring up the other situation that arises. What happens if I do trust my practitioner, I am compliant, and then I still have a failure? What happens then? If that's the case, two things may happen in that situation. Either you and your practitioner have not communicated properly, or they're not masterful or competent enough to deal with your specific situation, or maybe they did make a mistake. That's the tricky thing about trust, is that you're actually relying on another human being for your life and livelihood, which all comes down to you have to choose a practitioner whom you trust with your life and livelihood, knowing that if they make a mistake, or if they are incompetent, or if they don't know what they're doing, or if they're not paying attention, that your life's on the line. You're going to have to trust someone at some time in your life. Everyone's going to be in a hospital bed one day, and there's going to be a practitioner standing over them, doing things to them. And you won't have control of that situation. You'll have to trust the nurse, or you'll have to trust the doctor, or trust your acupuncturist, or trust your healer, or trust your friend, or trust your family member. And that is the reality of the patient-practitioner relationship, is that it is based in trust, knowing that sometimes things can go wrong. But you hedge your bets, and here's how you hedge your bets. You hedge your bets by choosing a practitioner you trust above all other practitioners. Then you can say to yourself, I'm doing the best thing possible for me because I'm going to be perfectly compliant with that practitioner that I have chosen. If you distrust your practitioner, know that you're at risk of not listening to them. And in that risk, you're at risk of failure. And after you failed, you're going to say to yourself, I was right to distrust. That I knew that practitioner was an idiot, not realizing your failure is due to your inaction. I was right. Will then create a deeper distrust, and then you will be set up with a huge distrust for all other practitioners. And in this situation, once you distrust all practitioners or all people to help you in general, you are now set up for a possible lifetime of misery and needless suffering. This happens to people all the time. People try to get help, it fails them, and then they don't trust. They throw all the cliches. You throw the baby out with the bathwater, or you cut your nose off to spite your face. There's several cliches that when people emotionally throw everything out once they have a bad experience or a traumatic failure. And so this is a very important concept, emotional concept, in the patient-practitioner relationship, because new practitioners are coming in at the top here. They're meeting new patients who have a distrust for all practitioners, maybe all doctors or all healers. And then the new doctor or the new practitioner has to then deal with this risk of non-compliance. And as the circle goes around a couple times, the chance of non-compliance, the distrust goes up. And as the distrust goes up, the non-compliance goes up. Then the failure goes up. And then the patient says, I was right, I've tried everything. It becomes more adamant. Doctors don't know anything, I know everything. And then a deeper distrust. And that is why I drew this chart today. It goes round and round. Now, in this Acne Bootcamp program, I've recognized this emotional phenomenon for many years. This used to happen in the office all the time, and it also happens all the time in the home version. I realized when I created the Acne Bootcamp program that I was going to have to create a system or methodology to override this emotional phenomenon. And I have. And it's called the rules for success, or the rules of the program, or whatever you want to call them. I just call them the rules. And when you make a solid rule, it allows a client to either comply with the rules and succeed, or non-comply with the rules in stone and fail at their own hand. Now, there's only 2 rules that are really required, that are absolutely necessary in the Acne Bootcamp program at this time. And here they are. You have to masterfully learn how to count your bumps, and I have created a system called Acne Analytics to help you do that and prove to me you are a master of counting your bumps, and you can email me your Acne Analytics sessions now. Before I had Acne Analytics, I had people do it at home with a magnifying mirror. But now with Acne Analytics, people are going to prove to me they can count their bumps. And the second thing that is required is that if anyone's having any concern whatsoever, they're expected to email in a timely fashion. Timely fashion being the key word there, because if you wait more than one day or several days, you are now non-compliant. Now that non-compliance can come from distrust, or maybe you're away from your computer, whatever it is. Non-compliance is what leads to failure due to inaction. So, having seen this countless times and having realized that acne patients fail due to distrust, I have overridden the entire emotional phenomenon with rules. This graph, it seems so simple. Distrust, noncompliance, failure due to the noncompliance. I was right to distrust and deeper distrust. It seems so simple, but it's so convoluted with the depths of emotion once you have a medical ailment. So this simple diagram, it captures a huge emotional phenomenon, but I'd like to break it down even more. This distrust represents what a client or patient comes to a practitioner with, oftentimes, especially these days in the days of Google Health forums and in a modern day medicine where everyone has an opinion. There's a huge distrust of practitioners. Now, this arrow right here recommends the actual recommendation. This box right here is either compliance or non-compliance, in this case, with that recommendation. This arrow here is time. So they don't comply, time passes, and they fail. This is the treatment failure. Now, to explain, this arrow right here represents, what do you think this arrow represents here? I'll give you, see if anyone guesses. Once they fail due to their own inaction, this arrow represents here a personal conclusion. I conclude. This was figuring out why they failed. And in a patient's perspective, if they did not do the proper actions, they're not going to take accountability for that. So this line represents two things: the conclusion, but also represents the lack of personal accountability or personal responsibility. And in this lack of personal accountability, you come to the conclusion, the logical conclusion, I was right to distrust this doctor or any practitioner because I failed when I thought I was to begin with. And now that creates a deeper distrust. And from that deeper distrust, the next practitioner you end up with, you trust even less. That is the downward spiraling phenomenon of trust in the patient-practitioner relationship, is deeper and deeper distrust until you trust no one to help you and you're stuck all on your own with the internet to try to fix yourself, which is riddled with failure. I hope this video brings some awareness to the power and the importance of the patient-practitioner relationship. And as a bottom line, this is the biggest recommendation I can give any client or patient of any chronic condition. Do not go to a practitioner whom you do not trust. Does that make sense? Do not go to a practitioner who you do not trust with your life and your livelihood and your wellness and your well-being. If you don't trust them as a human being, if you don't trust them as a person, if you don't trust that they're competent, if you don't trust their credentials, if you don't trust them, do not go to them. Because if you go to them while distrusting, you've just risked failure, and you'll get to be right about that failure. And then the next person you meet, you'll even trust them less. I hope this video explains a lot about why people are failing medical conditions all over the world. I hope this simple chart helps explain the psychology of chronic acne suffering. And I hope people can use this chart to learn the importance of trust in a patient-practitioner relationship and bravely. It's because it takes a little bit of bravery and bravely trust the next person they choose to take care of them. And keep in mind, it is a choice. There's not just one practitioner to help you. There's a choice. So the idea is choose and then trust. And for especially non-emergent ailments where you're not rushed into the emergency room, you have time to choose. I also want to make very clear that there are people out there, that there are clients and patients out there who do trust their practitioners and who still fail treatment. That is the risk that you have to take to get treatment, is that even if you do fail your treatment with your practitioner, you can't then distrust all other practitioners. Treatment failure can happen for several reasons, as I mentioned before. Lack of communication, maybe a language problem, possible the doctor made a mistake, maybe gave a bad recommendation. And so you should take control of your health by paying attention to what you're taking and paying attention to what you're putting on your face and paying attention to what you're putting in your body. But if it seems reasonable, if there's no blatant mistake, it's good to trust the recommendation and do it in a time-sensitive manner. If there does seem to be a blatant mistake, then you go back to the same practitioner. Before you become non-compliant, you go back to the same you don't ask other people or ask people online or ask third parties. If you trust a practitioner, you'll go back to that same practitioner and say, what did you mean by take this? Or what did you mean by do that? I didn't understand that. Can you explain that further? That level of communication, which is a higher level of communication than what is going on out there, will be the difference between success and failure. Just that simple asking of the same person. I want to open up the conversation that the patient-practitioner relationship can sometimes be as important or more important than the treatments that are being taken. The reason it's called the art of medicine and not the science of medicine is because medications alone are oftentimes not enough. It's the artistry of medicine where a practitioner monitors progress or lack thereof, where they can make adjustments to the medication. When a practitioner is both dealing with the ailment, the treatment, and the emotional factors all at once and how they're interwoven, that is the art of medicine. There is no science that can conquer emotional reaction, non-compliance, failure, and conclusion. This takes the art of medicine. And part of that art is learning the importance of trust. I hope this video helps the world. Talk to you guys soon. Take care.